unless you want to be North Korea and ban the internet and ban all outside access to information, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen with walls and bombs. You're going to have to fight the battle on the battlefield of ideas.
My name is Matt Orchard, and welcome to 50-50, Bias Both Ways. This is a podcast where I talk to the most controversial people I can find and then deliver two incredibly lopsided interviews back to back. My guest today isn't actually all that controversial, I don't think, but he does write about controversial subjects, and I've been a fan of him for a while, so I thought it would be great to have him on. He also makes for a great follow-up guest to Robert Spencer, as he can provide a very different perspective on the same topic. Now, I agree with Ali pretty much entirely when it comes to his take on Islam, so it was definitely an interesting experiment, trying to be tough on him in the second half. He thinks I could have been harder on him, and he's probably right, but I think it was a sincere attempt at least. Let me know what you think on the Facebook page, which is Facebook/5050 Matt Orchard, the subreddit r/5050podcast, or the website, the5050podcast.blogspot.com. That is 50 with numbers, not letters, in all instances. And if you like what you hear, please feel free to rate and review on iTunes to push it up the charts. Ali Rizvi is the author of The Atheist Muslim, A Journey from Religion to Reason, and has been writing about secularism, Islam, and other topics for several years. He's a regular contributor to the Huffington Post and has been described by Sam Harris as a rare voice of reason and moral clarity. So without further ado, Ali Rizvi. I am joined by Ali Rizvi. Ali, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with me today.
Thank you, Matt. It's good to talk to you.
And I just want to start by saying, Ali, I've been reading your stuff now for several years, and I think it's actually an understatement to say that you write well about issues surrounding Islam in the Middle East. I mean, I think your writing is beautiful in the sense that it's not just nuanced, but every syllable just always hits just the right note at just the right time. So with that introduction...
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely a pleasure. And with that introduction, Ali, could you tell us just a bit about your background and by all means shoehorn that into how you came to write your book, The Atheist Muslim?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was. I grew up in several different places. So I was born in Pakistan, in a city called Lahore. When I was just a few months old, we moved to Tripoli, Libya. My parents are both professors, so I used to go all over the place. So we were there for several years, and then after that, we moved to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where I went to school and went partially to high school as well. And then after that, I went back to Pakistan to do for university, for medical school. And then I came to Canada, I did grad school in Canada. Then I went to the US to specialize. I've been all over the place, but I think the first time I came to North America was when I was 24. So before that, I'd lived in 3 different Muslim majority countries, one in North Africa, one in like the heart of the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, which is the birthplace of Islam and the Quran and Muhammad, and then a South Asian country, which is Pakistan. So I got a pretty good idea of the whole culture-religion interplay and how they influence each other. Yeah. And during that time, I actually came across many atheists. Many people were very skeptical of religion and Islam, the way that people are skeptical about Christianity here. The only difference is you never heard that narrative from there. Right. Because if people spoke up about it, they'd either go to jail or they get disowned by their families or they could be executed. There are 13 countries in the world that actually execute people for atheism, where it's punishable by death, and they all happen to be Muslim majority. Right. So I had that, and then I sort of promised myself that when I got to a place where I could speak freely, I would not take it for granted, and I'd speak up for all of those who couldn't back home. And that's what I did when I came to Canada. Lots of correspondence with people. It grew when I started writing for the Huffington Post. I started getting messages from everywhere, from Egypt and Malaysia to Indonesia, Bangladesh, and I actually had very good personal friends who were affected by this. Raif Badawi, who's the Saudi blogger who's still in jail in Saudi Arabia, and he's been sentenced to he's had a sentence of 10 years and 1,000 lashes for simply starting a website called Free Saudi Liberals, and they said he insulted Islam, even though he just writes about secularism. I also knew Avijit Roy, was one of the Bangladeshi bloggers who was hacked to death, and he was actually American. He lived in Atlanta. So there are, and these are just two of the most prominent ones that made the
Yeah.
news. So I just felt like it was an important voice. It was a story, a narrative that you weren't hearing here in the West or on the left or the right. And I decided to sort of parse it, unpack it, and write the book.
Yeah, well, I've read about the case of Raif Badawi. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Raif?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just the floggings. It's just, I mean, it's difficult to read. Is there anything that anyone out there who's hearing about that case? Is there really anything anyone can do to help that cause of getting him out? Or
It's a really tough situation because this is Saudi Arabia, so this isn't like one of those countries that the international community can put pressure on. The United States is not going to stand up to Saudi Arabia. The UK won't stand up to them. The European countries won't stand up to them, because of the whole oil connection,
yeah,
because of their economic ties. Um, I was hoping that, I mean, Raif has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for I think third year in a row this year, and so I have been lobbying. I did write an article in Aftenposten, which is the biggest newspaper in Norway, I think,
right.
which was translated into Norwegian as well, talking about this exact thing. Like the Nobel Committee can actually stand up to Saudi Arabia and send them that message by giving him the Nobel Prize. It hasn't happened yet. He has received a lot of other awards, and his writings have been published. That people, just as long as they speak out about it, as long as they bring more
The more
awareness
exposure,
to
the
it.
better. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and an important thing to note is his first 50 lashes that he got in January 2015. He After that, they never lashed him again, even though he's got 995 lashes, 950 lashes left. But they stopped it after that, and
Well, that's
it was
something.
largely because of yeah. And I'm very good friends with his wife. I know his kids really well. My wife's very good friends with his wife. They live in Canada, so they did say that the international pressure helps, and that prevents them from mistreating him because they know that the world is watching. So that alone, right now, is having an impact, at least to some extent. Of course, it's never going to be over until he actually shows up
Yeah.
at the airport and we go to meet him here in Canada and he arrives here. So,
Well, definitely fingers
but
crossed for that
yeah.
as soon as possible. And
Hmm.
just going back to talking about Islam more broadly, I know that. So you were talking about how Islam was obviously a big part of your life when you were, growing up. I understand in terms of your personal family, Islam was sort of. It was a big part of your life, but it sort of wasn't at the same time. Would that be a fairly accurate way of saying it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, that's a little binary. It was and wasn't, but
Yeah.
my family wasn't a fundamentalist, and they weren't super conservative Muslims. I mean, they were conservative to some extent, but they weren't ultra conservative, in the sense that my parents were both Western educated university professors, so they encouraged us to ask questions. I knew that if I asked questions, I wasn't going to be disowned or kicked
Yeah.
out of the
Yeah.
house. But they did. We did have a lot of. I mean, my parents did encourage a lot of critical thinking. It was interesting because we were sort of inside a cocoon. So I'm in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I'm in a Pakistani family. I'm going into an American school, and I'm surrounded by Saudi Arabia, which is essentially the Taliban with a lot of money. And
Yeah.
what was fascinating to me is that when I was in, I think around 10 or 11 years old, our science teacher at the American school, I don't know if he got lazy, but he just put in videotapes of the Cosmos series, the Carl Sagan series.
Right.
And
Yeah.
this is in the 80s. So, I mean, I'm in my 40s right now, so this was a while ago. And that got through. It got through all of those layers that were around me, sort of sheltering me from these critical thinking and the scientific method and all of that. And those ideas actually got through. And it was interesting. Carl Sagan never really talked about anything like, Islam or atheism or immigration or any of those things. He just basically talked about the scientific method, the wonder of the universe, the methods of inquiry, falsifiability, empiricism. Those are the ideas that really, really got to me. They broke through. And that's why I'm a very big advocate of process, teaching these skills to children as they grow up, rather than the goals that we talk about, like all of our policies and everything we're going to do to try and curtail the whole Islam problem in the short term, like focusing only on terrorism or focusing only on immigration. I really think it comes down to process and talking about these elements more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and as you say, I mean, critical thought. I mean, it's not necessarily pushing an
Right.
agenda, but just if you start thinking a certain way, like you say with yourself and Carl Sagan, you connected the dots yourself, sort of thing. And I mean,
Yeah.
speaking about,
So you just teaching people how to think rather than what to think.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, speaking about sort of, I guess, the goal of your book. I mean, there's probably no one goal of your book, and we'll probably just explain what the goal of your book really is. But I just want to see if I'm sort of getting your position right here. So, I mean, speaking technically, to be Muslim is to be religious, but would part of your goal to be to sort of popularize the notion that atheists can be Muslim the same way that atheists can be Jews? So, I mean, even if Islam will never strictly be racial or what have you, it could be a cultural heritage without entailing any actual adherence to texts.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not completely comfortable with the atheist Jew thing because being Jewish is also an ethnicity, so that always gives a little bit of a counter argument. But the broad idea is correct. So the reason that the book is titled "The Atheist Muslim" is really about all of these closeted atheists and agnostics in the Muslim world who have to publicly say they're Muslim. So they're not able to shake off that label. They can't really talk about what they think. So they're living a sort of contradictory existence, and so the title of the book is contradictory too, because they're atheist in thought, but they're Muslim by presentation, right? Their passports, their identifications, everything says Muslim, because if they shake off that label, the Islamists in their countries will be out to get them. The governments over there, they may persecute them, throw them in jail like Rife. So there are a lot of really dire consequences to just being yourself. So these are the atheist Muslims. They're Muslim by face, but they're actually internally they are questioning these things, and they are challenging these. And the problem is that not only do the governments and the Islamists in their own countries not let them shake off the label, but when you have things like the Muslim ban, they're included in that too, right? And just to put numbers on it, and I've quoted this poll before. I mean, there's a Gallup poll that was done a few years ago that showed that in Saudi Arabia, 19% of people identified as non-religious and 5% identified as convinced atheists. So not just non-religious, but convinced atheists. Right. 5%, that's the same percentage as in the United States. Right. And the 19%, I always bring up this comparison that 19% non-religious in Saudi Arabia. In Italy, in the same poll, that number was 15%. So, and that's 1 million. It's a country of 20 million people. That's 1 million people there that identify not only as non-religious, but as convinced atheists. Right. 1 million people in Saudi Arabia. Another poll by AK News, which is a Kurdish news agency in Iraq, reported that number as 7% in Iraq. So in Iraq and Saudi Arabia alone, we've got a total of 3.5 million people who identify as convinced atheists. So imagine what it's, and those numbers are probably underreported, right? Obviously, but there's a huge number. But the problem is when you say Muslim ban, that includes all of them. Yeah, and none of them would be able to get out. So nobody's letting them shake off that label. So that is a narrative that I think people in the West really need to hear, because there are people who love freedom, who love diversity, who love equality, who love liberty. All of these values that we admire here, there are counterparts, and they live in these parts of the world, and we just never hear their narrative because they either end up hacked to death or they end up in jail, right? So that's a narrative we really need to bring out.
And you were talking about the Trump travel ban, which is actually a really good transition to another question I had. So obviously I'm with you in that conflating criticism of Islam with bigotry toward Muslims is a problem. But do you think that with the kind of sweeping policies like Trump's travel ban, with them being, far more popular amongst the general public than I would have ever thought possible a few years ago, the balance into that problem, it might be tipping the other way with actual bigotry passing as legitimate anti-terrorism measures?
I think that first of all, I don't think it's irrational for people to want to curb immigration when, especially in places like Europe, or these European countries that are suffering all these, terrorist attacks and
Sure.
people from they've had open borders, and I mean those things are a problem. I mean, obviously you need those short-term solutions, but I think too you can take that to an extreme. You can push it too far, and I think that's where Trump comes in. A lot of the far right. And like Marine Le Pen and the UKIP and all of these sort of far right nationalist parties in Europe. I mean, they're not necessarily. I don't think they're going to help the situation much with their sweeping policies either. So
Yeah.
I mean, I understand why people do relate to that. I think people are scared and they're in fear. But terrorism is about that. That's what terrorism aims to do.
Yeah.
It aims to scare you. And if you really think about that, I mean, of course, even one death is one too many. But we've gone from international, communicating, I mean, they're communicating with each other. All these global terrorist organizations orchestrating an attack on the World Trade Center, where two huge towers came down. They attacked right at the heart of the economic infrastructure of the United States. And now, we've come down to pretty much lone wolves acting on their own, driving cars into crowds, right? And it's not. Of course, that's a terrible thing, but there is I'm just going to quote, and I've done this before. I'll quote Yuval Noah Harari, the Israeli professor and the author of *Sapiens*, and where he talked about how terrorism is really, it's not the bull in the china shop that goes and destroys everything. It's the fly buzzing in the ear of the bull that drives the bull so crazy, causes it to overreact, captures its imagination, and causes it to fear the worst. So the bull just goes absolutely apeshit and just goes on and destroys everything in the china shop. So this is, I think that there is a danger of tipping that far. But I mean, that said, I don't think, I think that the whole Trump thing to me seems more like a backlash. I think it's a last ditch effort. I think about this jihadism the same way. It's a backlash for a lot of people who are seeing a world that was familiar to them that's slipping away, and the world's moving forward, right? So I think they're kind of reacting to that. So it's more, it's less a characteristic of the world of the future. It's more a symptom of a world changing, which is not necessarily always a negative thing.
Okay, well, I mean, always good to keep perspective, and we've gone through the second segment, so this will be an interesting one. With
lots of fun.
So Ali, this last week I've probably listened to over 5 hours of audio. I think that's conservative. 5 hours of audio of you trying to find things to pick you up on here, and I thought it would be appropriate, given last week's episode, to start by defending Robert Spencer. So, in one of your interviews that I listened to, you claimed that Spencer has accused you and Majid Nawaz of being stealth jihadis practicing taqiyya. And don't worry, I'm not going to accuse you of being a snake in the grass, because that would
no, please do. I'd be happy to talk about it.
That'd be a particularly ludicrous conspiracy theory, though, so I don't think I can make that one stick. But look, I did Google around, and as far as I can see, while he has criticised both of you, he hasn't said anything of the sort, really, in regards to that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, from what I read on Twitter posts and from I heard one of his podcasts that he did with, I mean, he keeps on, he's not a fan of Majid Nawaz.
I know that, yeah.
He is not, and I've been, like, this is just something that I heard. I mean, this is not, I mean, I don't follow Robert Spencer very, very closely.
Okay.
I just know about some of the main things he's controversial for. It's not very, very interesting to me because it's a very single issue focus. Like, Robert Spencer, Pamela Geller, like all these people, and they're focused on just sort of one main thing. It's not like Richard Dawkins, where he talks about religion, but he's also an evolutionary biologist and he looks at things from the view of science. And, he can be contentious and he can be controversial too. Mm-hmm. But, there's a sort of a big picture approach that he takes. So that to me is worth taking more seriously than people who just have sort of single issues. So in my case, yes, I have heard that he has said that about people like Majid, people like myself. I know that he had a very sort of contentious podcast with Aina, who's another podcaster, an ex-Muslim podcaster. So, I heard parts of that interview. I couldn't really stomach the entire thing. But
fair enough. Yeah.
All right. So if he doesn't think that would be great. But that's not the impression that I got.
Okay, I've only been through. I've listened to the interview. I might have to go back and listen to that particular section. I think maybe he gets a bit Weasley about it, but he definitely doesn't come down in a sense of, I think, insinuating he has a strong opinion toward that end. And I certainly can't find anything in text. But if an independent
So
researcher
I
wants
would
to,
I would say one thing that with a lot of these people, right, a lot of these Robert Spencer and even the Tommy Robinson types, who I know a very limited amount about, and say Anne Marie Waters in the UK, and who's running for the UKIP leadership.
Stuff, yeah.
Right. So the thing with a lot of them is, they'll say, name one thing that I've said. And, it's when they speak very, very carefully. And this is actually something that the Muslim Brotherhood does, which is really interesting. The Muslim Brotherhood always says things just to the extent that they can't incriminate themselves. But when you look at their associations, when you look at Tommy Robinson and Anne Marie Waters, for instance, they're associated with Pegida. Mm-hmm. So Pegida is a group, right, that started in Germany. Pretty much, and the guy who founded it had to resign because he was photographed, wearing Nazi uniforms and swastikas. So, these were people who created a furor about Kinder chocolates when they had black kids, they had kids from minorities like brown kids on their packaging, and they're really upset because it hurt. They thought that, it was a threat to their whole, the white identity aspect of things. So Pegida is definitely a bigoted group. And they won't disavow it. They will go on white nationalist podcasts. They will do that. They will associate with all of these people. But when it comes to actual, coming on TV shows, they'll be very careful when they watch their words. So for me, I'm very used to that. I'm used to that kind of doublespeak growing up in the Middle East. I've seen that with Islamists. I've seen that with jihadists. I know how they keep on trying to say, hey, we believe in free speech. That's why we're talking. And all the stuff they're talking about is about curtailing free speech, right? And all the associations that they have with the groups like CARE, the Council for Arab American Islamic Relations in the United States. They say all this stuff about, we're the victims and please don't be bigoted against Muslims. But, they associate with the Muslim Brotherhood. They associate with a lot of organizations that are actually terrorist organizations behind the scenes. So there is that's not something that I fall for.
Okay.
And yeah, if you're having a Twitter war about it in 140 characters, it's gonna be very, very hard to make the case because you have to find all these quotes and stuff. But if you really, really look into it, right, you can't just go by what people say, because if you go by what people say and you don't go by their backgrounds, their associations, and the kind of character they have, you end up with people like Donald Trump in the presidency, right?
Okay.
So
let's keep on Spencer specifically just for a moment. If I had to try and boil down Spencer's criticism of a lot of the reform movement, it would be that in terms of the link between Quranic texts and jihadi terrorism, there's not really actually a ton of daylight between you and him. Yet you're quick to sort of throw him under the bus as a nut job and a bigot just because he's maybe not always tonally perfect, which was something that we talked about in my last podcast. And I think you'd say that that's really partially self-serving so you can keep some liberal street cred.
No, I wouldn't say that it's a tonal issue. I have actually I've seen the tweets and everything where he's talked about Majid Nawaz being he's deceptive. Right, I've heard him talk about things like taqiyya, and in all honesty, when I hear people talk about taqiyya, especially in the Western world, when they bring that up, I know that they're not serious and they're not very, very well versed with the Muslim world and how things work. Because taqiyya is a very, very fringe phenomenon. It's a historical phenomenon that was mainly practiced by Shias to protect themselves against Sunni oppression, where they could lie if they were in a position where they were being tortured, not to save their life. I'm not defending it. I think it's a stupid concept, but I think the whole religion is stupid. But taqiyya is not something that anytime you hear any someone like Majid Nawaz who says that, and I disagree with Majid completely on theology, like completely. We had a podcast with him. We brought out those differences, but in purpose, in terms of what he wants to achieve practically, we're aligned. He's pro-secularism. But anytime someone like Majid who says that I'm a believing Muslim, right? And then he comes out and he says something in support of secularism. There are these people come out and just say, oh, it's got to be taqiyya, right? So my impression,
and that's
is
stupid.
That,
I get that that's stupid. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not
No,
accusing.
and
Yeah,
I've heard Robert Spencer talk about the Kia. Like I've seen, and again, I haven't really gone on his website. I haven't seen it. I'm just going by the tweets that I know that he has said, right? So,
okay.
and I know what he has said about Majid Nawaz, and I know a lot of his, like you can't really go into all of it,
Sure,
but
sure.
I know about his associations with people like Pamela Geller and people who just scream, jihadist and Islamist on everything because they're just focused on one issue. I mean, they don't really have anything else that they talk about. They have no big picture to actually look at these things. And I am as critical of Islam as any. I've written a whole book about it, right? So,
Of course, yeah. I'm
and
not
if
questioning
you've read
that.
my book,
Yeah.
so there, it's not. But when you have these arguments, you do have to. If you don't credibly do it, if you're not consistent, and if you don't acknowledge, if you're not completely, if you try to throw everything at it
Mhm.
that you have, true or false, if you're not fact checking, if you're not accurate, if you don't know about the context and the psychology and the sociology that goes behind why people believe, right?
Mhm.
And this is the problem. People who are very, very sort of ideologically staunch, the way that Robert Spencer is, I can guarantee you, if this guy was born in a Muslim family in Riyadh, he would still be a Muslim, right? Because and that's how people become Muslims. They're born in. It's all an accident of birth. If you or I were born into a really fundamentalist Hindu family in a remote village in India, chances are that's how we'd grow up. So there are some people who've gone out and tried to go beyond that. I like to think that I'm one of them. I don't think that these people are in that category. I think they're just very, very loyal, like just unwaveringly loyal to their ideology.
Okay, well, look, I'll put a pin in the whole what he has and hasn't said because I haven't been able to look at every tweet, of course. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt in that one. But I want to stick on Spencer for one more question, just because I thought it would be
Hmm.
interesting to see you
Oh,
directly answer a criticism he has definitely specifically lodged
that would be
towards you.
good.
All right,
Right,
so
that would be good.
it's a bit of a long quote, but this is him quoting you. So Rizvi says, on the right, it was like there are a lot of problematic things in Islamic scripture, so everyone who is Muslim must be banned or profiled or demonized. Spencer replies, it's false that any serious analysts on the right say that because there are a lot of problematic things in Islamic scripture, therefore everyone who is Muslim must be banned or profiled or demonized. No serious analyst wants Muslims banned or profiled out of some idea that all Muslims are terrorists or out of racial hatred against Muslims. People support Trump's travel ban because of the fact that there is no reliable way to distinguish jihadis from peaceful Muslims, and so they would prefer to keep out some harmless people rather than let some harmful people in.
Hmm. So I don't see the difference between that and what I was saying before.
And
Like the fact that it's okay. So basically what he's saying is that because we can't tell, the good ones from the bad ones, then we're just going to keep them all out and in essence have a ban, right? Have a blanket ban on all of them since we can't differentiate between the two. So he is advocating pretty much for the ban,
he's
even though he's
advocating.
saying that even though he's saying that very few serious people actually think that way. I mean,
He's advocating for the
if
ban, but he's saying the advocating the ban isn't coming from broadly viewing, all Muslims as terrorists. He knows that isn't the case. He's just saying pragmatically that's the best policy, seeing as there's no way to
yeah,
effectively
but
vet.
this is what I mean about the insidious thing. When you say that there's no way to vet whether that somebody is a jihadist or someone is not a jihadist, if there's no way to vet, right? When you're saying that, you're kind of lumping them all in the same thing. You're saying that, okay, well, but the thing is, anybody who believes in Islam could become a jihadist at any time. They could be a secret jihadist. They could be a taqiyya guy. They could be, drinking and having and smoking and all that stuff and being a secular one day, and then they could be a ticking time bomb and turn into a jihadist any moment. Those are all part of the blanket demonization of an entire people. It just is.
Would you say that?
Like he's saying the same thing to me. Honestly, it's not. I mean, we can go ahead and we can parse the details. Well, he said this, he said that, but ultimately, the effect is the same. He's saying yes, not all Muslims are terrorists, but all Muslims could be terrorists. Some Muslims are not terrorists right now, but they could eventually be terrorists because their book, Islam, has this problem in it, and the Quran has connections with terrorism, which it absolutely does, right? I actually agree with him on that. But because of that, anybody who's a Muslim and subscribes to this can turn at any time, right? That idea, to me, that is not that much different from saying that, every from a blanket demonization.
Well, I mean,
I
let's not talk
Go
about future potential. Let's talk about someone who is actually, part of an ISIS, operation or something. What system would you propose we could put in place where we could effectively tell the difference? Because it's mainly in their head, right? I mean, if we don't have access to their communications, we don't know who we're letting in. I'm not sure about it's like any Muslim could.
You do behavioral profiling. I mean, there is a system. This is a system that's been worked out for a long time. Israel does it very, very well. Israel can't really racially profile. Right? They can't, because a lot of them are, they're very similar ethnically to the Arabs and their neighbors in a lot of ways, the people who live in that area. So they can't do that, but they do behavioral profiling. They're extremely good at it. They have protocols. They have trained people on it. In the U.S., they've done behavioral profiling. How many? This is obviously, like in the U.S. You see that this is not as much of a problem, and the U.S. has very, very good vetting procedures in place. Again, people who come to the U.S. tend not to go apeshit. I mean, the majority of people who have caused problems regarding Islamic terrorism in the United States have been U.S.-born people. Omar Mateen, who was the Orlando shooter, this is just one example, the San Bernardino shooters. I mean, these were people, his wife, she came through a marriage visa, right? They came legally. They were legal immigrants, and the other guy was born here. Omar Mateen was born here, and because he was an American citizen, he had access to semi-automatic weapons, and even if he was on a no-fly list, nobody would have picked up on it, because the gun shops are not allowed to do background checks on these people. They don't have access to the no-fly list, so he's able to get all the weapons. He was able to do whatever he wanted to. There are people who, Jose Padilla was Hispanic, right? The LAX guy, the underwear bomber, he was Nigerian. These are people of different kinds of races. Some of them are visitors. Some of them have come here legitimately. Some of them are illegal. But it can come from any place. You have homegrown. You have this whole video of people in ISIS, all these burning their Western European passports. A lot of them were born in these Western countries. So, you can have a time machine. You can go back and prevent their parents and grandparents from coming in.
I get.
You can, whatever you want to do. But this is a battle of ideas, right? Unless you're going to ban the internet, you're not going to get rid of the potential for recruitment of these people. So unless you want to be North Korea and ban the internet and ban all outside access to information, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen with walls and bombs. You're going to have to fight the battle on the battlefield of ideas, right?
Fair enough. I think you did very well, and honestly, I don't much enjoy having to try to argue with you, to be honest. But
no, you gotta listen. You do this. You told me exactly what the premise was, and I was ready for it. I was actually. I don't think you were hard enough on me.
Well,
anyway,
it's tough. It's tough. As I said, it's
I know.
It's a cognitive dissonance, I guess, but it's a skill worth trying to refine. But again, Ali, just really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. If anyone out there has enjoyed this, please do buy Ali's book, The Atheist Muslim. Oh, that's the one thing I actually want to ask all guests now. How did you find the experience in general? Doing sort of like both extremes one after the other. I know, as you said, I didn't maybe go as hard as I could, but I don't want to kind of cut people off or whatever. But aside from maybe I didn't go hard enough, did you have any observations about the format?
I actually like the contentious part. I enjoy that more. I feel like people don't do that too much anymore. I don't know if I'm too nice, but whenever I'm doing interviews, I don't think people actually really challenge me too much. I mean, I talked to Josh Zepps, who's also from your part of the world.
Yeah, I listen to We the People sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the interviews I specifically enjoyed. I enjoyed the Vox interview too with Sean Illing because they asked questions that were very challenging. So I enjoy the sparring. Amazingly, we've had people on our podcast who we also thought enjoyed that dialogue, but a lot of people don't seem to like it when you challenge them a lot. I enjoy it. I don't think you're going to get these ideas out there until you properly challenge them. I mean, that's what I've done with my own core beliefs when I was younger, with Islam and the way I was raised and all the culture. The only way that you can progress is by doing that. So I think that more people should be doing it. And the reason I agreed to do it, I know this is a brand new thing for you, and I hadn't heard about you before, but when you told me about the idea, it was like 15 minutes of just, nice questions and 15 minutes of as contentious as possible. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Thank you very much,
and
Ali.
I'd be happy to spread the word.
I mean, it means a lot, and
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you again for coming on.